A scene of devastation in a remote region of Venezuela confirms the fate of a missing passenger jet. West Caribbean Airways Flight 708 has mysteriously dropped from the sky while flying at over 30,000 feet.
It took off from Panama. It's a Colombian operator. There was 160 French citizens on board.
It's the biggest accident that has ever occurred in Venezuelan territory.
Investigators hope the crew's desperate last words
West 708, do you have a problem on board?
will help them pinpoint the cause of the crash.
Affirmative.
Tell them we've had a flame out on both
Engines.
But instead, the mystery deepens.
It's a storm, Captain. It's a storm.
The pilots can't agree on why the plane is falling. Now it's up to investigators to figure it out.
Mayday, Mayday.
At Panama's Tocumen International Airport, West Caribbean Airways Flight 708 begins boarding 2 hours behind schedule. It's well past midnight. The 152 passengers on this charter flight are returning home to Martinique. They've been visiting the Panama Canal. Captain Omar Ospina has just flown in with his crew from Colombia. As he's behind schedule, he must turn the plane around quickly. But there are more unexpected delays. First Officer David Munoz informs the captain that the flight is overbooked. Even the jump seat in the cockpit is filled.
Let me deal with it. Alejo.
I need you on board to do the announcements in Spanish and English.
Yes, sir.
Angela and Luisa can stay behind.
I'll let them know.
2 of the flight attendants will stay in Panama because there's not enough room on board.
Sir, we just got the final load sheet.
Checking the weight of the aircraft
Take off from runway 21 left, sir. 3,050 meters.
and the length of the runway, Captain Ospina calculates that he can safely get airborne. Their flight path will take them through some heavy weather, something crews are accustomed to during hurricane season.
Okay, we're ready for takeoff. Request pushback clearance.
Ground, West Caribbean Airways.
708, request pushback clearance, gate 28.
West Caribbean 708.
Cleared for pushback, gate 28. Proceed to runway 21 left. West Caribbean 708, runway 21 left, cleared for takeoff.
The V1. Rotate.
At 1 in the morning, Flight 708 begins the journey to Martinique.
They took off from Panama Airport to Tocumen Airport with a heavy load for a long flight for that aircraft.
The flight should take 3 hours.
They climb up to 31,000 feet, their initial assigned flight level. They have filed a flight plan with a final cruise level of 330, 33,000 feet.
The crew is flying an MD-80. The plane is easily recognizable by its 2 rear-mounted engines.
The MD-82 aircraft is a very good aircraft. It's a model that was derived from the DC-9. They made it longer, more fuel efficient, and more modern instrumentation and avionics.
Anti-ice on, please.
As altitude increases and temperature drops, they activate the plane's anti-ice system. Half an hour into the flight, while cruising at 31,000 feet, the weather ahead is turning nasty. A low-intensity hurricane moving in from the Atlantic has been whipping up winds across the region.
Request deviation left.
Barranquilla, West 708. Request deviation to the left to avoid formation.
West Caribbean 708, cleared to deviate left.
In the kind of weather they were flying, it's common for pilots to deviate from their initial route to avoid this bad weather.
It should get better soon.
"40 minutes into the flight, the plane has burned through thousands of pounds of fuel, allowing it to fly higher.
In order to reduce weight, they had to climb to 31,000 feet, wait until the weight goes down, and then do a step climb up to 33,000 feet.
Let's do 330.
330. Barranquilla, West 708.
Request level 330. 708, cleared to level 330.
The captain now begins the climb to their scheduled altitude of 33,000 feet.
Turn off engine anti-icing. I can't accelerate.
The captain notices that the engines don't seem to be responding.
I'll go to the bathroom.
The crew isn't overly concerned. Almost a third of the way to Martinique, West Caribbean Flight 708 enters Venezuelan airspace.
Is there cake and coffee for everybody?
Or are we expected to share?
As the storm intensifies, First Officer Munoz worries about icing.
Can I turn it on, Captain?
Do we have ice? Put them on.
Soon the turbulence gets worse.
Man, that is a lot of nasty weather. Put the fasten seatbelt sign on.
Please, stay in your seat. I'm dimming the lights so the passengers don't stand up. Should we go down to level 310?
Do it.
Maiquetía, Whiskey.
The Mayday air traffic control station in Venezuela isn't equipped with radar.
Request descent to level 310.
The controller depends on pilots to tell him where they are.
310.
Captain Ospina turns off the autopilot,
Give me 310.
and the plane starts heading back down to 31,000 feet. The turbulence is getting even heavier. And then suddenly the stick shaker goes off. It's the most serious warning that a crew can get. The captain's control column starts to vibrate, warning him the plane is flying dangerously slowly. At close to 31,000 feet, the plane suddenly drops.
It's a storm, Captain. It's to stop!
The plane is falling fast. The crew has only seconds to figure out why.
What's 708?
Level down to level 240.
Descending to 240. Do you have a problem on board?
Affirmative. Tell them we've had a flameout on both engines.
We've had a flame out on
Both engines.
Confirm?
We've had a flame out on
Both engines.
Roger. Confirm radial and distance from Punto Cabello, if possible.
The controller needs to know where they are.
Negative. We are 14,000 feet.
We're about 4,000.
And going down. The plane is uncontrollable. Keep your heads down. Stay down. Keep your heads down.
Confirm people on board, intention.
And distance from Nave if it's possible.
152 people on board and the plane's uncontrollable.
In just 30 seconds, the plane falls 9,000 feet.
I understand. 152 people on board.
Affirmative.
Acknowledge. Confirm.
At what level you are crossing at this time? Whiskey.
Charlie. Whiskey. Charlie. Whiskey. 708.
Confirm position, if possible.
Whiskey. Charlie. Whiskey. 708. Confirm position if possible.
While flying almost 10 kilometers above the Earth, West Caribbean 708 mysteriously drops from the sky.
Position, if possible.
Air traffic control in Venezuela doesn't know its location, nor if anyone has survived. The morning after West Caribbean Flight 708 goes missing, Venezuelan villagers report that a plane has crashed on a remote farm. Colonel Lourdes Ramos is the lead air crash investigator for the Venezuelan government. She has never handled a crash this big. She's shocked by what she sees. All 160 people on board, most of them French citizens from Martinique, have died.
Fue muy impresionante para nosotros porque era nuestro primer accidente.
It was a real shock for us because it was our first really big accident, and it had the highest number of deaths for any crash in Venezuela. We felt a lot of pressure because of that.
The scope of the investigation is daunting. Lourdes Ramos knows the plane that has crashed is one of the safest planes in the world. There are more than 3,000 such planes flying every day.
Investigating a crash where an aircraft so popular as the MD-80 is a great responsibility because of the effects they could have on the rest of the fleet.
The Colombian, Venezuelan, and French press from Martinique all descend on the site demanding answers. The plane has crashed in a lawless area next to the Colombian border. Kidnappings are common. The Venezuelan army informs investigators that it can only protect them during daylight hours.
We don't have a lot of time. Let's get everything documented.
Ciertamente, el equipo no estábamos incluyendo.
Certainly our team, including myself, wasn't prepared for the emergency we faced.
El accidente complejo y muy difícil poder.
This accident was complex, and it was very difficult to quickly figure out what had happened.
De lo que había sucedido.
After the victims have been removed, the investigators' first goal is to determine how much of the plane landed intact at the crash site. If it's all there, they can rule out a mid-air breakup.
Pudimos observar que estaban los 4 puntos de la aeronave, la cola.
We could observe the 4 corners of the aircraft, the tail, a part of the cockpit, and some remains of the wings.
Esto nos dio idea.
And this suggested that there were no explosions or a collision that produced the accident.
No hubo explosiones o algún acto que produjera ese accidente.
Investigators question the Maiquetía air traffic controller.
Told me that they had a flameout on both their engines. Do you have a problem on board?
Tell them we've had flameout on both engines.
Cuando recibimos la información del Centro de Control de Maiquetía,
when we learned that the crew had reported a flameout in both engines, we immediately focused on the function of the airplane's engines.
se fue al funcionamiento de los motores de la aeronave.
Yeah, I'm just getting up to speed now.
Joe Sidor is a senior investigator at the NTSB in Washington, specializing in foreign assignments.
As soon as we're notified of an accident, we contact the manufacturer of both the airframe and the engine. Given the initial information of a dual-engine flameout, this caused us to start getting as much information about the engines as possible.
No sign of fire inside the engine.
Laura Lease had her hands full with this accident. It was a remote location, there was 4 countries involved, and she didn't have a big staff.
Let's see what we can find out about the weather they flew through.
Colonel Ramos knows that severe storms can kill a plane's jet engines. In 1977, a DC-9 with similarly mounted rear engines experienced a flameout while flying through a thunderstorm. Both engines were disabled. The plane fell 17,000 feet, slammed to the ground, and erupted in flames. Investigators suspect that the engines of Flight 708 may have flamed out either from heavy rain entering them or due to turbulent winds.
One way to think of an engine flameout is when you have a pilot light go out on your furnace at home. The engine is working properly with combustion going on internally, and then the flame stops and the engine quits.
If both engines flamed out, it would explain why the plane fell from the sky in one piece. But Colonel Ramos knows that her best chance of finding out exactly what happened to the engines lies with the plane's 2 black boxes. They could hold critical flight and voice data. But retrieving that data gets complicated by political concerns.
The other difficulty with this investigation was the international aspect. This was a Colombia operator that took off from Panama, was overflying Venezuela, and crashed on their soil. So from the Venezuelan standpoint, they had very little connection with the actual flight or passengers on the aircraft.
The Venezuelan government, deeply mistrustful of the United States, has the final say on who will examine the black boxes.
Since this is a United States manufactured aircraft, we offered our facility to them to download both the FDR and CVR. But they requested that they be downloaded at the French facility of the BEA, our counterparts in Paris.
The black boxes are sent to France for expert analysis.
The French aviation authorities participated in the accident investigation because all the passengers were French citizens that lived in Martinique.
In the meantime, investigators pursue another possible cause of engine failure: contaminated fuel. They track down the fuel truck that filled the plane in Panama.
Fue importante examinar el combustible.
It was important to test the fuel because it was a possible cause for why the engines had failed.
Habían fallado los motores. Esa era una posible causa.
El análisis del combustible por búsqueda de contaminación.
We asked the Panamanian authorities to test the fuel for contaminants, but the results they obtained were negative.
Fueron negativos los resultados.
Hi. Hope I can be some help.
Joe Sidor arrives from Washington with 2 engine experts.
Once we arrived on scene, that was one of the first things that we wanted to look at was the engines. So my engine investigator and the Pratt & Whitney investigator went to each engine and examined them thoroughly.
What they find is surprising.
Both engines exhibited indications of high-speed rotation at impact. That is to say that the evidence indicated that both engines were operating at a very high power.
The investigators give the engines a clean bill of health.
When we obtained the analyst results for the engines, we realized that they worked perfectly.
Trabajaron perfectamente.
Do you have a problem on board?
Affirmative. Tell them we've had a flameout on both engines.
We've had a flameout on both engines.
Sure looks like those blades are turning when the plane hit the ground.
And that the flameout reported by the crew never happened.
Flameout nunca ocurrió.
The main suspect in the crash of one of the most popular planes on Earth is ruled out. Investigators need another lead.
It made us want to get that FDR and CVR data as quickly as possible.
The team is now counting on the plane's 2 black boxes to shed light on the cause of the crash. They travel to France, where one of the boxes has been opened. When they listen to the plane's cockpit voice recorder, investigators are surprised by what they hear.
It's a stall, Captain. It's a stall.
Luego de escucharla,
After listening to the cockpit voice recordings, we realized that the plane had entered a stall.
había entrado en pérdida.
How did this plane stall at over 30,000 feet with 2 working engines?
To create the lift needed to fly, a plane depends on a very fast-moving stream of air over the wings.
An airplane stall is when the lift over the wings is reduced to the point that the lift cannot support the weight of the aircraft in the air.
It's unusual for planes to stall at such a high altitude. Investigators hope the plane's second black box will reveal why that happened.
Cuando abrimos los registradores de vuelo,
When we opened the flight data recorder, even though it was really damaged, the conditions inside were good, and that was a huge relief.
y realmente fue un alivio encontrarlos en buen estado.
But for some reason, much of what's on the recorder is gibberish.
Unfortunately, some of the data was not usable. And it was some very important data points that were not available, such as elevator position, rudder position, heading, and the most important parameters, engine pressure ratios.
It's a disappointing loss for Sador.
We need those engine parameters.
The engine pressure numbers would tell investigators how much power the engines were generating. They would paint a picture of how the airplane was flying in its final minutes. In Washington, the NTSB offers to help. Sophisticated software may be able to recapture some of the lost data.
We wanted to work with what data we had to recover any engine data that we could.
Meanwhile, investigators look for other clues about what may have caused the stall.
That's quite a storm. Probably very heavy rain.
They discover that the plane flew through freezing, wet weather, capable of causing ice to form. Ice on the wings can cause a plane to stall.
When ice accumulates on an airplane, it will have increased drag and increased weight and decreased lift.
The MD-80 is equipped with an anti-icing system. When turned on, it blows hot air from the engines onto the wings, preventing ice from forming.
Let's see what they did about the ice.
Put on the fasten seatbelt sign. Man, that is a lot of nasty weather.
As the plane rose to 33,000 feet, Captain Ospina made an unusual decision.
Turn off engine anti-icing.
A short while later, First Officer Munoz wants to know if the anti-icing system should be put back on.
Did I turn it on, Captain?
Do we have ice?
Pilots generally examine the outside metal windowsill. to see whether ice is forming there.
Put him on.
It appears the captain saw ice. Since they were flying through cold and wet conditions, investigators don't know why the crew didn't simply turn on the anti-ice and leave it on.
Durante el vuelo,
With the weather conditions they had, they should have been using the anti-ice systems during the entire flight.
antihielo durante todo el vuelo.
Investigators wonder if the crew made an error that allowed ice to build up on the plane's wings, causing it to stall and fall from the sky. Promising new evidence in the crash of West Caribbean Flight 708 may help the investigative team to zero in on the cause of the disaster. The NTSB has managed to recover missing data about the MD-80's engines.
This was very important for us because it allowed us to understand the operation of the engine throughout the flight.
If there had been ice on the wings, the engines would have had to work harder to overcome the friction it creates. The engine power numbers would have gone up.
Look at this. Engine power wasn't going up, it was actually going down.
Therefore, that showed that there was no ice on the airframe.
Ice didn't cause the stall. So what did? Investigators must determine why the engines weren't providing the power needed to keep the MD-80 in the air. The airline's troubled history of safety violations gives investigators a possible lead. It had been cited for flying overweight planes.
Colombian authorities used to bring the aircraft to a scale they have at Bogota Airport and compare against the manifest, and in some occasions they found that the aircraft was heavier than what was reported.
Did Flight 708 stall in midair because it was too heavy?
Durante la visita que se realizó a Panamá,
During our visit to Panama, we observed that West Caribbean didn't have very rigorous control over the checking of passengers' luggage and their weight.
de los pasajeros.
If a plane is too heavy, it may not be able to fly at higher altitudes where the air is less dense. Pilots need to make these calculations carefully.
Un piloto sabe a qué altitud puede volar, revisando o estudiando.
The pilot knows at what altitude he can fly by studying the aircraft's performance tables and inputting the plane's weight and the temperature.
La temperatura.
What investigators don't know is whether Captain Ospina did the maths correctly.
Stand by.
They now try to calculate whether Flight 708 was too heavy to avoid stalling at 33,000 feet.
So we went back and looked at the number of passengers on board, the number of crew on board, and the weight of the aircraft itself, along with the baggage.
They already tested the plane at its reported weight of 148,000 pounds.
All right, let's add a few thousand pounds. We got heavier luggage, misweighed cargo.
Let's try 155,000 pounds.
Investigators now make the calculations for a plane that's grossly overweight. They're in for a surprise.
And even with a heavier aircraft at takeoff, the aircraft could maintain level flight at 330.
It's a setback for the investigation.
We're missing something.
Let's go back to the beginning.
After much research, investigators still can't figure out what caused the plane to stall.
Thanks.
The answer has to do with how a plane distributes power. When it's turned on, the anti-icing system draws energy from the engines, reducing power for thrust.
This decrease in thrust can affect the performance of the airplane depending on the weight and the altitude. So the performance study showed that the airplane was perfectly safe to fly at 33,000 feet with the anti-ice off.
Anti-ice on, please.
However, it could only fly as high as 31,900 feet with the anti-ice on.
It was the anti-icing.
Robbed them of the power they needed.
They shouldn't have gone higher than 31.9.
La conclusión a que llega el equipo de investigación.
We concluded that the aircraft was flown too high for its weight and the weather conditions it faced.
Eso y las condiciones que tenía todo el vuelo.
Put him on.
The airspeed started to decelerate when the flight crew turned on the anti-ice system. This reduced the thrust of the engine.
Investigators conclude the reduction in thrust led the plane to stall.
Sir, we just got the final load sheet.
They now assume that when Captain Ospina calculated his maximum cruise altitude, he failed to factor in the need for anti-icing.
There are many factors they have to take into account when planning, and apparently they did not do it in this case.
But if low thrust led to a stall, why didn't the crew notice? Part of the answer is that while the problem was developing, they weren't flying the plane.
They had their autopilot on.
The autopilot should not let a plane stall. Investigators wonder why this particular autopilot let that happen. While researching the autopilot on the MD-80, they discover a bulletin from the plane's manufacturer. It was sent to the airline 3 years earlier.
Under some conditions, airspeed could decay to stall warning before the autopilot disconnects.
El boletín que emitió Boeing.
In the bulletin issued by Boeing, it described another incident with an autopilot that was almost the exact same as what had happened with West Caribbean.
Idéntica.
The bulletin warned crews that if they set the autopilot to maintain the plane's altitude, they should keep a close eye on their airspeed.
The operation bulletin warned that with the autopilot on and at altitude, that a similar situation could occur, where the aircraft could maintain altitude and airspeed could decrease if the pilots were not monitoring the airspeed.
So in order to maintain altitude, as the speed goes down, the aircraft starts to pitch up, nose up altitude, increasing the angle of attack to have a better lift. But that has a problem because you cannot exceed certain angle because you can enter stall condition.
In this case, the autopilot led the aircraft into a condition that caused an excessive angle of attack. That generated the stall.
As important as the bulletin was, there's no evidence that it ever reached West Caribbean's pilots. Investigators now have a deeper understanding of the events causing the stall. The crew were not monitoring their instruments, believing that the autopilot would maintain the correct speed. They were wrong. It was at this moment that the captain began to notice that something wasn't right.
We can't accelerate.
Don't go to the bathroom.
That they were aware that they had a problem, but they didn't know why.
The captain decided to descend to an altitude where the engines would perform better.
310. And descending to 31,000 feet was the right choice. That's why he disconnected the autopilot to begin the descent.
Give me 310.
The plane is very close to stalling, but the crew is just a few seconds away from overcoming the problem.
If he would have attained 31,000 feet, during that descent, the speed would have gone up and he would have recovered the lift, and after leveling off, there will have been no problem at all.
They almost made it, but the captain was oblivious to his biggest threat. The plane is still traveling slowly, with its nose raised at a dangerously high angle. That's when the crew experienced some bad luck. The weather they were flying through was turbulent, winds were intense, and the plane was vulnerable.
Our study showed that it would only take a 20-mile-an-hour updraft to push the aircraft into a stall.
Investigators conclude that the plane was hit with a ferocious updraft that lifted the plane's nose just enough to put it into a stall. A crisis the crew then mishandled.
There was very little communication between them. The captain thought he was having a flameout in both engines.
Tell them we've had a flameout on both engines. We have a flameout on both our engines.
The captain was not telling the first officer what to do. The captain was only fixating, or if you will, have tunnel vision on the engines, which is a very big problem in this situation.
As the investigation into the crash of Flight 708 nears completion, only one mystery remains unsolved.
It's a stall!
Munoz seems to know what was happening.
Why did the crew fail to recover from a stall that they'd been trained to overcome?
To get out of a stall, a pilot should increase thrust and pitch over, that is, push forward on the control column.
But as the recovered flight data shows, that is not what Captain Ospina did.
There is no indication that the pilot pushed forward on the control column to reduce the angle of attack and to increase speed.
He's pulling back on the control column.
At that point, it was impossible to recover from the stall.
The captain should have pushed forward. The question remains, why didn't he? Investigators get their first clue when they re-examine the engine data at the precise moment of the stall.
That's what distracted the captain.
At the time that the airplane stalled, we also saw that both engines rolled back at the same time. This most likely confused the pilots.
When airflow to the engines is disrupted, it causes a rollback, reducing thrust.
Because of the updrafts that in the area, it most likely increased the angle of attack of the engine inlet, which then caused the engines rolled back.
With his engine power temporarily reduced, the captain wrongly concluded that his engines had quit.
It's a stall!
First officer yelled, "It's a stall, Cappy. It's a stall." There was no response from the captain. This showed that the captain was fixating most likely on the engines.
Unaware he had stalled, the captain made things worse by pulling back on his control column. That kept the nose of the plane angled dangerously high.
Tell them we've had a flameout on both engines. We've had a flameout on both engines.
La tripulación no supo
The crew couldn't understand the situation presented to them.
que se les presentó.
West 708, go down to level 240.
Do you have a problem on board?
We've had a flameout on both engines.
They had a heavy buffet from the stall. They were looking at the engines, which were rolled back, and they were also communicating with the air traffic controller. During that time, there was not much troubleshooting going on in the cockpit. This was a very, very difficult time for the pilots.
It is very important that the crews communicate in an effective way. And in this case, you don't hear the two pilots communicating between themselves.
Y no hubo comunicación efectiva entre ellos.
It was an almost silent cockpit until the time just before the accident, when they realized they were in deep trouble.
Del accidente, se dieron cuenta que estaban en graves problemas.
But by that time, it was already too late. They were past the point of no return.
During that descent, according to the flight data recorder, they reached a rate of descent, an average of more than 12,000 feet per minute. That rate of descent, not only the G-force will prevent them from any coordinated action, that vibration in the aircraft will be a lot. That's why when you hear the voice recorder, you hear the voice trembling.
Negative, negative. We were 14,000 feet. We're 1,000 and going down. The plane is uncontrollable.
And that's because of high vibration in the aircraft.
For everyone on board, the final plunge was a nightmare, lasting almost 3 minutes.
Whiskey, Charlie, whiskey.
When Colonel Lawless Ramos and her team interview friends and family of the pilots of West Caribbean Flight 708,
How was he when he was at home?
they uncover other long-standing issues that may help explain the crew's behavior.
West Caribbean Airline was going through a very critical financial status.
Esto debido a una situación económica que atravesaba la empresa West Caribbean.
Because of West Caribbean's economic struggles, the crew members hadn't been paid for 6 months.
Que tenían aproximadamente como 6 meses que no cobraban su.
And this could have influenced the captain's
De
concentration.
alguna otra manera influir en la concentración del capitán al momento de atender la emergencia.
Investigators discover that Captain Ospina was forced to take a second job, moonlighting in a bar, in order to make ends meet for his family.
Evidentemente, el nivel de estrés que
The level of stress that the captain was under because of his financial situation was huge.
es importante.
We solved the fuel situation yet?
I think we're getting close, Captain.
Before the accident, the crew was delayed in Colombia for hours because the airline couldn't pay for their fuel. That was their third of 4 flights that day.
La tripulación
The crew was under a lot of stress because they were already late and they didn't know if their flight would be canceled.
no se sabía si el vuelo se iba a cancelar.
It's a stalker! It's a stalk!
Investigators also believe that the 21-year-old first officer should have voiced his opinions more clearly.
Entre el capitán y el copiloto existía una
There was a considerable age difference between the captain and the co-pilot, and this might have intimidated the co-pilot when he needed to speak up.
dirigirse al capitán con autoridad.
Did I turn it on, Captain, or what?
Do we have ice?
No matter how young the co-pilots and the first officers are, how old and experienced the captain is, they have the right to preserve their life. If they see something that's going wrong,
Stalk, Captain! It's a stalk!
and they alert the captain, and he does not react, they should react by themselves.
The investigation's official report concludes that there was an insufficient level of situational awareness in both pilots.
Although the pilot's actions are in question in this flight, we also have to look at the operator. Did the operator provide proper training? We found that the training was insufficient, that they did not receive proper CRM training, and they did not receive proper stall training.
Este accidente ocurre por una cantidad de factores que no son
This accident happened as a result of numerous factors that aren't only attributable to the crew.
en el funcionamiento de
There were deplorable conditions in the operation of the airline.
Estas son
And over time, these faults can lead to accidents.
y que en el transcurso del tiempo van afectando negativamente todo el funcionamiento de la empresa.
Negative! Negative! We're at 14,000 feet! We've had to climb out both engines!
The report makes a long list of recommendations to ensure that the tragedy of Flight 708 never happens again.
Se hizo recomendaciones de seguridad a la autoridad aeronáutica colombiana.
We made recommendations to the Colombian aviation authorities to improve pilot training, specifically better training in crew communication and having a better awareness about the use of the plane's autopilot.
Del uso del piloto automático en las aeronaves MD.
After this accident occurred, the airline was grounded and it never operated again. It went bankrupt and simply disappeared.
But West Caribbean Airways did leave a valuable legacy. Better safety measures for every other MD-80 taking to the skies today.